Hey everybody, welcome back. We are still out in the field and man, we're getting tired. It is definitely hot. You're with the American Battlefield Trust. I'm Garry Adelman. That's Chris White behind the camera, and I bet, and that was his nod there, I'll bet that you already know where we are. This is Seminary Ridge that we're standing on right now. You might be able to see the Virginia Memorial over my head over there. And, you know, just to take you back a little bit, we've been out in the field, and I think most of you know this already, but this is part of the Gettysburg campaign. And when they came to fight at Gettysburg, there's a huge battle on the first day. If you thought otherwise, I hope we've convinced you that this is a real deal fight on the first day where the Confederates drove the Union Army off the field and the Union took up a strong position, generally in the shape of a fish hook. There's, of course, intense fighting on the second day where you could say, it's a simplification, that General Lee attacks the Union flanks, makes some gains, but never breaks through the line, and that brings us to the third day. And on that third day, I think you know what's largely going to happen, especially in the afternoon. It's the most famous attack in all of American history, and it is going to take place not from where we stand, not just to the right, but on a mile-wide front. And to talk about this thing that a lot of people call Pickett's Charge, let me bring on my good and longtime friend, Wayne Motts, new-ish President and CEO of the Gettysburg Foundation. Wayne?
Garry, thank you very much. So everyone, let's just give you a little brief overview here about July 3rd, 1863. Now, Robert E. Lee, he's got momentum for these first 2 days of the battle. For July 1st and 2nd, he's driven the Union Army right back to Cemetery Hill and along Cemetery Ridge. So on July 3rd, he basically has a choice. What does he do? And in his mind, he says that with proper concert of action, this means he wants to have a coordinated attack on July 3rd, 1863, but he's not going to get it because the Union Army is going to attack over at Culp's Hill, the right of that Union line, the left of the Confederate line, and that's going to preempt Robert E. Lee's plan. So on the morning of July 3rd, 1863, Robert E. Lee will get on his horse and he'll ride down the ridge over here behind me near where his monument is, and he will visit his senior commander, General James Longstreet. And they'll go out to the Peach Orchard area, that heavy fighting area for July 2nd, 1863, and it is there that Lee will hatch a new plan, and that plan, which is basically Plan B, not Plan A, is to attack the center of the Union line for July 3rd, 1863 in what we call Pickett's Charge. 12,500 men in an infantry column. Off to my left, to the right of your screen, on the northern half of this attack will be the men from Alabama, North Carolina, Mississippi, Tennessee, and a number of other states under Pettigrew and Trimble's divisions. And then off over here, off over to my right, to your left, along the Spangler Wood line will be Pickett's division, about 5,000 men. They'll get in position 158 years ago today, here in the morning, ladies and gentlemen, and they will stay all afternoon through this heavy cannonade on July 3rd, 1863, on July 3rd, 1863. So let's just walk over here. Chris, you want to bring the camera? Let's just go over here and take a look at the position. So the wood line that's off to the left of your screen, that is the Spangler woodlot, the Henry Spangler Farm. And if you look off over here, you'll see the Spangler Farm buildings, and off in the distance, Little Round Top and Big Round Top. So when the troops get in position here on the morning of July 3rd, it's an extremely hot day, just like today. General Garnett's brigade will get in position over my right shoulder off to the left of your screen, and then General Armstead's brigade off over here at the point of what we call the Point of Woods. Longstreet himself will watch this attack right here at the edge of the Spangler woodlot, and parts of the 38th Virginia and 57th Virginia from Armstead's brigade will be right there on the morning of July 3rd, 1863. And when that attack starts, everybody's going to rise up, and they'll begin at about 3 o'clock after this heavy cannonade on July 3rd. Garry?
Thanks, Wayne. You know, this guy's been a battlefield guide here for more than 30 years, and I notice when he's coming over here, he's still running over. He can't wait to talk about this stuff, and that's what we're talking about. I think you know this, the passion of some of the people who come here, that work here, and for you all who are watching. You're with the American Battlefield Trust, and we're at Gettysburg 158, and we hope you're having a meaningful anniversary. Now, Wayne was talking about Pickett's division, and of course, Pickett's division, he mentioned more than 5,000 soldiers, is made up of all sorts of, people that come in 3 brigades. Our Garnett, Armistead, and Kemper. And there are other elements of the charge too. And I've got a couple of questions for my friend standing next to me. This is Ancestry Ann. She is the family historian for Ancestry Fold 3. Like once in a while you run into people who have really cool titles, and she makes good on it. So Ann, first of all, I think you have some ancestors in the Civil War.
A few. I have 10 documented Confederate ancestors. My husband owns all the Union ancestors. And I had 2 ancestors in the 55th North Carolina who were here on that day fighting in Pickett's Charge. One of them actually gets shot and wounded in the thigh, but he continues on and fights out the rest of the war.
And the 55th, you might remember, we talked about them a little bit on our first day's videos already, okay? So, but now we're talking more about Pickett's division here. So I think you have a soldier in the 57th Virginia, Garnett's Brigade you might want to talk about?
I do. His name is John Thomas Sladen. He was nothing remarkable about him. He was a Virginia boy, 19 years old when the war broke out, and like most of the men in that area, I think there were about 40 of them, he enlists, he joins up, and there he is. And he fights most of the war. He comes from a long line of military ancestors. He had 2 ancestors who fought in the Revolutionary War, and one of them fought in the Continental Line for 5 years. So signing up and fighting, definitely what he did. We know that he was in part of Pickett's Charge. We know that he survived. He goes on, he has a family, and he becomes a tobacco farmer. That's what John did. But this was the day that's why we're here.
Yeah, let's bring David.
Let's bring Dave in.
Because if you guys don't know anything about me, you know I love contrivances. So what we've done is set this up here totally because this soldier, Sladen, that we were talking about, who is captured late in the war, who does end up serving a prison term in a famous place, the Old Capitol Prison in Washington, is the great-great-grandfather of, I think, my friend and my boss, if there's such a thing, David and Duncan.
Absolutely,
Thanks for coming,
Gary.
David,
No.
CEO and president of the American Battlefield Trust.
Thank you, Gary, and thank you, Ann. I'm still learning more and more about my ancestor all the time, so I did not know about his previous ancestors from the Revolutionary War, so that's tremendous. Thank
And
you.
one more thing about him.
Okay.
He was 5'6". We
Okay.
know you got your height somewhere else along the
I
line.
probably got that from my father's side. I don't know if we can get this with the glare. This is the photo. This is really, I've got another ancestor who was in a different regiment that was sent out west, but we're very, very happy that my father did some genealogy work to find this photo of John Thomas Sladen. Yeah, he was from Southside, Virginia, a tiny little community called Leatherwood, right on the North Carolina border. I've always wondered how he survived this day, because it's my understanding that the regiment, the 57th Regiment of Virginia, excuse me, essentially ceased to exist after this day. And his pension records say that for a period of time in 1864, he was, quote, sent home on duty arresting deserters. And for many, many years, I thought that's a terrible duty to have to be assigned to. But then it struck me several years ago that he may have been very highly motivated to do that duty based on what he saw on this ground. And when he saw that his comrades, and in many cases probably some of his relatives and people that he lived with in this small Southside Virginia community left their lives and their life's blood on this field, he may have been very highly motivated to find those deserters and get them back into line. So yeah, he was eventually cycled back into the lines around Petersburg. As we mentioned, was captured at Dinwiddie Courthouse, but survived all of those ordeals. And going way back, he enlisted, I believe, in July of 1861. So he was involved in this conflict from its opening moments to the very close. So, you know, it's wonderful to be able to bring his photo here and have this experience. I've been here on July 3rd before and walked the charge at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. You just get something from being on the ground that you just don't get when you read it in books. and experience it in any other way. So obviously our mission is battlefield preservation, so I'm sorry you can't be here with us today, but this is a great way hopefully for you to experience the battlefield and hear some personal stories like this. So,
That's
Garry?
great. Thanks so much, David. Let's walk and talk a little bit. I'm going to bring David back on in a second here if he's willing, but you're with the American Battlefield Trust. This is Gettysburg 158, and we're talking about Pickett's Charge, the units, the people, and soon, in just a couple of minutes, the artifacts and objects. So make sure you hang on because we have some cool stuff that was actually here on that day. Now, here's my main question for you, David. Let's slow down a tiny bit. Have you ever been to Leatherwood, Virginia?
I have actually driven through Leatherwood, Virginia, and it was actually on a trust trip. My former boss, Jim Lighthizer, and I went to Martinsville, Virginia to meet with a donor and potential future board member. Again, that's a small town city on Southside Virginia, and Leatherwood's just a little bit north, so we had to drive through Leatherwood to get back to the main highway. But no, I've never spent any time there, haven't searched out his graveyard or grave or anything like that. But.
Well, I confess before this, I went to look about your ancestors' place, and you look on Google Street View and Satellite View, you would not know that you were driving through anything. There is very little going on. It is a very rural place. So there's David Duncan's roots.
Yeah, it has not changed much since the 1860s, to be sure. The roads may be paved, but no, it's still hard scrabble farming. I think that was his occupation as well, too. So, no, and again, it's great to be here. It's great for me to be here, horning in on Gary's time here at Gettysburg. I want to thank everyone for being a part of this weekend. Thank you for giving us your time, and thank you for your support of battlefield preservation. I say it all the time, we could not save a single blade of grass or a single square inch of dirt without the support of our great members all across the country. So thank you.
Good. It's good to hear someone. I bet you all enjoy someone beside Chris and I saying that all the time on these videos. So thank you, David. What I would ask you to do is, if you're watching this on Facebook, go subscribe to our YouTube channel or sign up for our emails at battlefields.org. Now, let's slow down for a quick sec because we have a surprise for you coming up. But I feel we need to tie a few things up. First of all, you may feel gypped because we didn't start the charge. Don't worry, the next video will be. We'll be talking about the charge. But before we do, it seems like, Wayne, what was the cost here? I mean, David's ancestor managed to make it through this, but a lot of them didn't, right?
And he's going to be, unfortunately, a rare bird. There are many casualties here, Gary, for July 3rd, 1863. So we think there were about 12,500 men that actually took place in what Longstreet's assault, Pickett, Pettigrew's charge, call it whatever you want. We're going to call it Pickett's charge. If you can't beat them, join them. And 12,500 men, the casualties are anywhere from 6,000 to 8,000 soldiers because there's a lot of walking wounded soldiers. So the Confederates, they don't count casualties, men killed, wounded, or captured, in the same way that the Union Army does. If you're wounded but you're fit for duty in the Confederate Army, officially, you're not wounded. So I think the official numbers that we have here are a little low. So I think the Confederate casualties here are about 8,000 men killed, wounded, or captured between the whole group. And the Union Army, probably 1,500 casualties out of the 6,000 defenders for July 3rd, 1863. And I want to mention one more thing. We talk about physical wounds. We talk about men killed. We talk about men maimed. But what we often don't talk about is the mental condition and the emotional distress that these soldiers face, not just at Gettysburg, but on every battlefield. Many of these soldiers have mental health needs forever, and they're going to live with this charge basically for the rest of their life, whether they were wounded or not here, Gary.
Yeah, thanks, Wayne. And if you want to learn more about Pickett's Charge, you can download the Trust's Gettysburg Battle app. But there's an old classic about it called George Stewart's Microhistory of Pickett's Charge, which is excellent. But I think that one was subsumed, and I have to be careful here what I say because I don't want to seem like I'm favoring any one person. But there's a Pickett's Charge book that I think is the best. Now, the standard work on the subject, and it's by a guy named Jim Hessler and another guy whose name, just to be careful, for propriety's sake, I don't want to mention. So look for that. It's available from Savas Beatty, and it's a really excellent work. So let's turn around here and see what else we have. You may have seen the Virginia Memorial. Of course, that was erected in 1917. Only $50,000 to make the whole thing in those dollars back then. It's got 7 soldiers from various walks of life at the bottom, and you're supposed to, be able to see. Maybe it's 6. that you're supposed to be able to tell who's who, a farmer, a mechanic, a lawyer, a professional soldier, based on this. Virginia came together for the cause is what they're trying to say. And of course, on top, Robert E. Lee on his horse, Trigger. No, wait, Traveler. Us battlefield guides know that everybody likes to call him Trigger on a tour. They really think that's what it is. And his face is actually made from a mask of his actual face. So that is his actual face up here. Now, we've already visited with guests from Ancestry Fold 3 and, of course, the American Battlefield Trust and Wayne Motts at the Gettysburg Foundation, while Chris is doing some Usain Bolt movement there. But we're about to introduce somebody else as well as we come up, and you're going to see some cool things as well. So the Gettysburg Foundation does all sorts of things here at Gettysburg. You've seen my video with Wayne Motts, the CEO and president already. But I want to introduce a member of the board of directors and the man who kept the ship more than afloat and really helped to chart the course of the Gettysburg Foundation, and that is David Malgee on the board of the Gettysburg Foundation, a good friend of ours.
Thank you, Gary.
And, I have to say something before I introduce you.
Sure.
Okay? And sarcasm intended. When you have your own artifacts and your own museums, you can wear gloves or not wear gloves wherever you want. Okay, but for now, the museums and the people we visit with, they are allowed to treat their objects how they would like in the safety measure that they would want. Go ahead, Dave.
Thank you, Gary. So I'm not going to be wearing gloves today because it's a hot day, but I have 3 artifacts related to Pickett's charge that we're going to show here. And the first one is pretty poignant. This is, in fact, a hospital discharge for a Confederate soldier named J.F. Payne. We don't know a whole lot about Private Payne other than he enlisted in Danville, Virginia in early 1861. We know that he spent an extended period of time in a Petersburg hospital, but we don't know why. We do know that he was discharged in March of 63, and that the doctor who signed the discharge was John Claiborne, who was very interesting because he actually would be in charge of the Petersburg hospitals during the siege of Petersburg and would famously fight with General Lee over whether or not the wounded and sick should be evacuated from the heavily shelled city. At any rate, J.F. Payne took this discharge, he folded it over and put it in his breast pocket. Fast forward to July 3rd, 1863. He is in the ranks of Company A of the 18th Virginia Garnett's Brigade, and he will be shot in the chest during Pickett's charge, killed instantly. Some said shot through the heart. As you can see, there are blood stains on this discharge that mirror one another where it's been folded over. Very poignant reminder of what these men sacrificed here at Gettysburg. You may also note the words "rebel blood" written across the discharge. This was in fact done by a Union soldier who was rifling through the pockets of Private Payne and saved this as a souvenir. We will find out by the muster records that Private Payne, in fact, was reported as missing in action during Gettysburg. It wouldn't be till March 25th of 1864 that he will be reported as being killed at Gettysburg. Find a Grave reports that he's buried in the Gettysburg plot in Hollywood Cemetery, though I don't know how they would know that. But I'm going to trust them, and that's how we'll leave it.
Well, not everything you find on Find a Grave. People give us our best knowledge on Find a Grave, so sometimes it's correct, sometimes it's not. But we do know some men were reinterred down there. Not only is this a sad story, but just to add that little punctuation on the story of John, and this is an amazing artifact. He was one of 7 children. He and his brother Samuel both enlisted. They were the oldest boys of Robert and Susan Payne. His brother had died the year before at 7 Pines. He had been killed at 7 Pines. So Robert and Susan lost their 2 oldest sons to this war. And this is what remains of John.
I want to say that, as you were pulling, that out and mentioning what was on that, the bloodstained ephemera, we all crowded around sort of to see it. Wayne, what is it, about an object that suddenly made us sort of all gasp there? The fact that it has the evidence of the human carnage, guys?
Yeah, that's because you're connected to it. So one of the great ways we can connect to Civil War battlefields is the tangible material culture objects left over from the American Civil War. And this is one of them. You show a 10-year-old kid this, and you tell them that's blood of a Confederate soldier who died here in Pickett's charge, they get it. They understand it. And that's why it's such a great educational tool, Gary, I think. It's why we need these artifacts just as much preserving them as we do land or as we do structures. We have to think of preservation in the Civil War as a total thing.
And can I say one last thing? Excuse me, Ann,
sure.
just one last thing, and that is, when we look at artifacts like this, we tend to ooh and ah and think they're very special, which they are, but we can't get caught up on the fact that they weren't carried by real living, breathing human beings. And this brings home that fact. There was sacrifice, there was death, there was pain on this battlefield, and we can never forget that.
There was so much pain. And to just add on to getting people involved, just these artifacts, family historians have a hard time getting their nieces, their nephews, their grandchildren interested in what they do. Go tell your nieces, nephews, your children, your grandchildren that your ancestors fought at Gettysburg. Show them things like this. I guarantee you they will become interested. It's tying people to these real events, to this land and the events that happened here, that just make it so much more interesting for everybody.
All right, I think we have more going on here. So David, what's next?
Well, I'm going to call on David Duncan, the president of the American Battlefield Trust, who is going to be my helper here. Okay. What David is holding is a model 1855 Whitney rifle. And it's got a very, very interesting history. There's lots of carvings on it. We don't know what some of those carvings are, but we do know what some of them are. For instance, if we can look down here on the stock, you may or may not be able to see it, but it looks like it's F31 here, and there's also an 8 on here, right here, CV, 8CV F31. That stands for 8th Connecticut Volunteers. Company F, the 31st person on the roster of that company, who was a guy named Thomas L. Green. Green will carry this musket, this rifle musket, to Antietam, where he will lose it on the afternoon of September 17th, actually when A.P. Hill strikes the left of the federal forces that have crossed the Antietam. And he will drop this rifle, retreat across the Antietam. It will be picked up again by a Confederate team that's scouring the battlefield for usable artifacts, and it will be reissued in December of 1862 to a Confederate soldier named Booker T. Hunt, who is in Company D, also of the 18th Virginia, John F. Payne's own unit. Hunt will participate in Pickett's charge. He will be slightly wounded, but wounded badly enough to drop his weapon and retreat back to Confederate lines. He will be captured, strangely enough, the village of Waterloo on July 5th of 1863. Well, you know Waterloo today as Rouserville, Virginia. Hunt will be captured and sent to Fort Delaware, where he'll spend the rest of the war. He will give the oath of allegiance on June 20th of 1865 and be released. He'll return to Prince Edward County, Virginia, his home, where he will be a Confederate sympathizer for the rest of his life. In fact, in 1918, he is returning from a reunion of Confederate veterans where he will drop dead and die. He will be buried in Confederate gray and have the first national Confederate flag draped over his casket. Now, the other guy, Thomas L. Green, the original owner of this weapon, will fight in 10 major battles of the Army of the Potomac. He will get to Cold Harbor, and on June 2nd of 1864, he will be shot through the head and killed instantly. He'll be buried in his bullet-riddled, blood-soaked kepi. That's not the end of the story of this particular rifle with this 1853 Enfield bayonet. In fact, it will find its way into a GAR post and then onto an American Legion post. And in 1973, at a reunion, a World War II reunion of the 332nd Artillery Battalion, it will be given as a door prize, and it will be won with ticket number 45, which was drawn by Sterling Strawbaugh of Battery D. So quite an interesting story on this particular weapon, a veteran of Pickett's charge.
And let me just say real quick, Chris White didn't have a chance to look at this. He didn't know what we were going to show, but I'm going to grab the camera from him and just ask him for his impression of this unique piece.
Dave, if you don't mind.
Oh, that's fine.
By all means. So this is going to be basically what's going to look a lot like all the other rifles on the battlefield. So there are some differences between an Enfield, a Springfield, Whitney, anything else you could think of. But this is an 1855 model. You'll notice the 1853 Enfield bayonet. Bayonets essentially became interchangeable on the rifles. They weren't made specifically for each rifle. So some guys might have to trade off. You'll have this, what's called a socket bayonet. A socket bayonet goes over top of the muzzle rather than into the muzzle, which is a plug bayonet. This comes from the early 1600s when we decide that we want to keep firing our rifles or our muskets at that time and not turn them into big spears. So they're secured on here simply by a small piece of metal that you can twist. It goes right over top of your front sights. Front sights are very easily broken off. Why? Because we put these into stacks. They look like guns, teepees. So whenever you come up into a line, you put all these guns together, you actually have to interlock these bayonets, and a lot of guys will lose their front sight that way. So you really have to trust your front sight if you're a reenactor to a person. The triangular bayonet that you see here, there's a great video on a guy named Chris the Redcoats channel on YouTube. I encourage you to go look at it. Chris likes to help break myths of war. A lot of people will say that a triangular bayonet is designed to be more deadly. That's not true. That's just the milling process. This is how they have to make it. So it's not more deadly to put a triangular bayonet into you. So thanks, Chris, for helping to break that myth. But this rifle would be very indicative of what you would see here at Gettysburg. Rear elevated sights, so you could fire and hit something 300 to 500 yards away with good windage, but you're really going to fire 300 yards and in. So this is just a fantastic piece that you see here from the Gettysburg battlefield. David, thank you so much.
I say, Chris, one of the reasons we know that this was carried by Booker T. Hunt is because he actually carved his name on both sides of the stock. It's very faint, but his name is there. So we'll move on to the final artifact, if that's okay. Let me give this to David. Okay, so what Chris is getting here is another very poignant reminder of the destruction here at Gettysburg. What we have here is a Springfield rifle, or what's left of it, dated 1863. And this, in fact, is a rifle that was hit by canister fire. You can see the destruction that caused by being right in front of an artillery piece loaded with this deadly canister. There is a well-known artifact book on Gettysburg relics that actually describes this particular piece as being found on the high water mark at the high water mark at Gettysburg. That is not true. It was found on a Virginia battlefield. It's an unnamed Virginia battlefield, but it clearly demonstrates the horror of war. I often think about someone going to the dentist. If they knew the dentist was going to hit a nerve, you know, they would be afraid. These guys knew what they were facing when they faced the mouths of these cannons, and yet they marched straight up there, doing their duty, fulfilling their orders, and honoring the cause, whichever side that they fought for. But here again, a very, very graphic reminder of the horror of war and what these soldiers faced here at Gettysburg, particularly as they faced the guns on Cemetery Ridge.
So for you gun aficionados, just to tell you, this is stamped 1863, but it is a model 1861 Springfield. You can notice the end of the rifle is almost snubbed off. It almost looks like it was worn down. We see that everything is a little bit misplaced just due to the impact. But we can see the ramrod has been bent. We can see the center of the barrel has been ripped apart. You can notice the middle, the second band, thank you. Yeah, thank you. That has been moved far up, while the front band or the first band has been moved way down. Back here, this is how I know it's an 1861 model, because we have a side screw in here. The side screw was indicative of the 1861 model Springfield, even though it's made in 1863. You can see on here, I talked about elevated sights. You might be able to make out the 3 and the 5 for the 300 and 500 yardage. And if you would aim this at 500 yards, you would actually aim it like this, because you're going to have to aim, and the bullet is actually going to travel in an arc towards you if you're actually able to hit anything. It's an amazing piece just to hold out here.
Good. You want to take us out, Chris?
No, you go for it, Gary.
Okay, well, hold on. He's holding a gun. I'm holding the camera. What's going on here? We've been doing this already, but each time we do it, it's just unbelievable. Something about telling the stories of the soldier and actually being able to see, or even sometimes hold, some of those items. So I want to thank all of our guests that made this happen. David Malgee of the Gettysburg Foundation, Wayne Motts of the Gettysburg Foundation, David Duncan, American Battlefield Trust, and Ancestry Ann. God, I'll say her last name, Ann Mitchell of Ancestry Fold 3. Thanks to Chris White behind the camera. Thanks to Annalise, our video intern, for helping us behind the camera as well. Thank you all so much for watching. Share this with your friends, and thank you for supporting battlefield preservation and education.